joy. Joy was birthed that night so long ago. It triumphed, certainly, in Joseph's life. Even though the child that was born was not his. And it triumphed in Mary's life. Even though she ended up with a lot of criticism because she was pregnant out of wedlock. And ultimately, joy triumphed in the shepherd's life. Now, how did that come to be? How did joy triumph in Joseph and Mary in the shepherd's life? Well, it came because originally they said yes to God. They felt God asking them to do something. Joseph to take Mary as his wife. Mary to participate in this outlandish task of giving birth to God's Son. And the shepherds asked to go and see this thing that had been known to them. Joy triumphed in their life because they said yes to God. And I guess that's what I'd like you to focus on with me this morning. And that's really one reason why we like that pink candle, which has traditionally been called the candle of joy. Joy has a way of coming into our life when we follow those nudges, those requests from God, by saying yes. And we are to remember and to recognize and celebrate that, and we light that pink candle, the candle of joy. I remember over 10 and a half years ago, when the search committee of this church asked me if I would come and be your pastor. Now, I knew that serving this congregation was going to be very different in many ways from my previous experiences in ministry. But as I visited with Dave, your moderator, things kind of started to fall in place. And as I visited with Arlo Richter, who was the executive pastor of the region, things continued to fall in place. And because things started to fall into place, I sensed that God was behind all this. And the more I sensed God working in this call that brought me from Hudson down here, the more I became aware that God was saying, Mike, this is where you now need to be. So I said yes. Please hear this. I said yes first to God. And then I said yes to this congregation. And as a result of saying yes to God and to this congregation, do you know what my experience has been like here as your pastor? Joyful. It's been a ministry, I think, predominantly full of joy. Now, please hear this. I mean, there are some days when I'm not too joyous about being here in this church. I mean, I don't experience a lot of joy when I have to go into the bathroom and mop up all that water because another pipe is broken in the woman's john. And I don't experience a lot of joy when I have to go down into the church dungeon to explore that strange smell or that weird noise that's coming from there. And I tell you, I really don't enjoy having to take on a bath in Fellowship Hall or the sanctuary. That's happened. And so I don't experience joy all the time being here as your pastor. But really, we come right down to it. One never experiences joy every day. One doesn't experience joy every day at work. One doesn't experience joy all the time in their marriage. Joy isn't there with us all the time, 24/7. But my experience here as your pastor has been predominantly a joyful one. And it came because of a yes to God and to the congregation. When you say yes to God, as Mary did, as Joseph did, as the shepherds when you think God is nudging you to do something, my sense is, like those people, Mary, Joseph, shepherds, you too, will experience joy. If you say yes to God and go on a work mission trip, when you feel that God is nudging you to go on a work mission trip, I almost can guarantee you, you will experience joy on that trip. Oh yes, you're going to get some sore muscles because you haven't used some of those muscles before or in a long time, but your experience on a mission trip will be a joyful one. When you say yes to sing in choir, when you feel that God is maybe nudging you to come and join the choir, you can experience joy. You really will. We do a lot of laughing on Wednesday nights. In fact, Lisa had us all in stitches this past Wednesday night when she shared with us a very, very, very embarrassing experience that she had in her classroom when her principal was present evaluating her. I'll let Lisa tell you more about that story. Joy. It comes when we say yes to God. When you say yes to God and start worshiping on a regular basis, there's going to be a lot of joy that you're going to experience on Sunday mornings, rather than loneliness or isolation or hecticness. Joy as a way of coming into our life when we say yes. Number of you said yes to ringing bells for the Salvation Army. I don't think any of you did not experience joy when you rang bells. Is there a little amen on that one? Yeah. When we follow God's nudges, as the shepherds did, as Mary did, as Joseph did, we experience joy. Now again, we're not going to experience joy all the time, but it will be there. The year was 1818. The place was Oberndorf, Germany. Pastor Joseph Moore had just been told that the church organ was broken and would not be available to be used in the Christmas Eve worship service. Pastor Moore was really upset when he heard that. So he decided to take a long walk, and he walked up into the mountains, because Oberndorf is in a valley surrounded by mountains. And he walked up in the mountains just to kind of calm down and to reflect a little bit. And there, as he was in the mountains looking down on his little quaint village, he saw how peaceful, how still, how quiet it seemed to be. And as he gazed upon his home village, he began to think about a poem that he had written a couple of years earlier. He had written this poem and just kind of put it aside. The poem was about the shepherd's visit by the angels and how they went to Bethlehem. And as he thought about that poem, as he looked at his village, the thought came to him that maybe the poem could be put to music. And maybe it could be sung at that Christmas Eve service. And maybe that would make it a little special, and because the organ was not going to be used. So he came down from his walk, and he sought out the organist, Franz Gruber. And he gave him the poem that he had wrote. He pulled it out of his file, and he asked Franz if Franz could put this to a simple little melody. Gruber said, well, remember, the organ is broken. Yes, I know, said Moore. Gruber gave him the poem, and Franz looked at the poem, and finally said, well, yeah, I could probably put a small little simple melody together, and I could probably pluck it out on my guitar. And so that Christmas Eve night, Gruber and Moore sang to the guitar this simple little song that was created. The song was entitled Silent Night. A broken organ resulted in the creation of that song. But in a sense, That's many times how God works in life. God can take the brokenness of life and bring joy out of it when we respond to God with a yes. God can take someone who's really down, and rightfully so, because they have lost their job, and in time, bring a little joy back into that person's life. God can take a family that might be struggling with a lot of finances at this time of the year, and is down because of that, but in time, God can bring a little sparkle back into that family's life. When they draw close to God and say yes to God, God has a way of bringing joy out of the brokenness of life when we respond with a yes to God. This past Wednesday at Bible study, Fran Nixon shared with us when it came time to prayer time about a young 35-ish-year-old mom who attempted to commit suicide. Her name was Heather. And Fran asked if we, in our prayer time, could remember Heather in our prayers. And of course we did. Now when one is moved to try and take their own life, obviously there are situations going on. Obviously they feel that there is no hope, no light at the end of their tunnel. Don't really know what those situations are in Heather's life. But I do know this. If Heather draws close to God, joy will eventually come into her life. I know that. It might take months. It might take a number of counseling sessions with a therapist. But if she draws close to God, as she walks through those days and goes to counseling, joy can come back into her life. And then during our prayer time this morning, we prayed for Lily's family. Again, it's so tragic. 7th grader, gone. Because of an asthma attack, you rarely hear that, but it happened. We can't begin to imagine their sadness. But again, I know that if Lily's family draws close to God, in time, joy can come back into their family unit. God has a way of bringing joy when we respond to God with a yes and draw close. And this was the experience of Joseph. It was Mary's experience. It was the shepherd's experience. Luke says that they returned glorifying and praising God for all that they had heard and seen, just as it had been told. It can be our experience as well, especially during the Advent Christmas season. But we need to draw close to God. And when we feel God nudging, we need to respond by saying yes. Mary and Joseph, the shepherds, did. And when we follow their example, I think we too will discover a little bit of joy in the midst of this, our Christmas season. Let's bow for one prayer.